So the first question is, why cash discounting? And this is something that I feel like our industry so far has done a terrible job at communicating to salespeople and ISOs. I feel like right now the only explanation, or at least the most common explanation in our industry for, why should you go pitch cash discounting to a merchant is that it's a way for you to make more money. Or it's a way for you to save the merchant a lot of money. But actually, neither of those are the reasons why we should do cash discounting. Because, really, when you come right down to it, why couldn't the merchant just reduce their prices a little bit across the board? Increase their prices rather. Why couldn't they just increase their prices? Wouldn't that be less disruptive to their business, and they would still save that money per se because they're getting more revenue in? Wouldn't that have kind of the same financial impact as doing a cash discount? Well, of course it would. Now again, there's other arguments. When you're competing with Walmart, is it a good time to raise prices across the board and things like that? But there's nothing keeping the merchant from increasing their prices. So why should we do cash discounting? Or even more pointedly, why should we pass the cost of credit card processing on to the consumer? Why on earth would we ever want to do that? Well, the reason is really simple. The reason is that interchange fees in the U.S. market right now are ridiculous. And the interchange fees in the U.S. market are ridiculous because they have not been regulated, and that's okay. I'm not a big fan of government regulation, but they haven't been regulated. The rest of the developed world has been regulated, but Visa and MasterCard and Discover and American Express and Chase Bank and Wells Fargo, and they're all making money in the U.K. charging 0.3, 0.2, 0.4% interchange, and in the U.S. they're charging 1.75, 1.8% interchange. So why is that happening? Well, it's because in a free market, the people who get the benefit, they are the ones who need to have the power of choice. And so when I get out into the marketplace and talk about cash discounting, the reason that merchants are so receptive to that is because I'm not talking to them primarily about, hey, guess what? I had this awesome way that you can screw your customers and save tons of money every month. And unfortunately, that is how most reps that I hear, I'm talking to them, they found really ingenious ways of saying that, but that's really what they're saying. They're going to a merchant and saying, hey, guess what? We have this awesome thing, like, why are you paying credit card processing fees anymore? Just pass those on to your customer and screw them. Then you don't have to pay credit card processing fees anymore. And when you have a pitch like that, the merchant has all these red flags going off, and they're like, what are you talking about? I don't want to screw my customer. How am I supposed to, survive in my business if I'm trying to screw my customer? That doesn't make any sense at all, right? And of course that doesn't make any sense. So, the idea is not about screwing the customer. The idea is we are in America, and American business owners are capitalists, free market capitalists by a vast majority. You won't find too many socialist small business owners in your marketplace, right? Most of them are about free market capitalism, and free market capitalism is right now in this particular area being threatened because you have these mega banks and these mega card brands who are in effect, negating free market economics by providing a benefit to someone who is not the one paying for it. And that is a bad thing. Think about this. If you wanted to use kind of an example with the merchant, you could tell them and say, imagine if your son or daughter went out to buy a car and you told them that whichever car they picked out, you were going to pay the bill and they would never know how much it cost you. What car do you think your son or daughter in their late teens, early 20s would choose? Are they going to choose the Ford Pinto? No. They're going to choose the Lamborghini Diablo. They're going to choose the LaFerrari. Why? Because why should they care? They're getting a benefit, but they're not the one paying. And so as a result, you get this weird mismatch where, of course, the people getting the benefit want more benefits if they don't have to pay for them. Well, right now in the U.S. market, consumers are getting enormous benefits from credit cards. They're getting cashback rewards, they're getting convenience, they're getting access to their money, they're getting, all these different reward programs and everything, and yet they are not the ones paying for those rewards. The one paying for those rewards is largely the small business owners. and they're paying for those rewards through interchange fees. But of course, consumers really have very limited knowledge, if any, about interchange fees. So what you're presenting when you're talking about, why cash discounting, it's because we believe in giving your customers the power of choice. They are the ones who are choosing to use a credit card or to use cash. Now, I believe the merchant should still pay the cost of being able to accept a card. That's why I sell a terminal to the merchant. That's why I have a monthly fee that I charge to the merchant. But as far as the individual costs of processing a specific card type, I am a big believer that the consumer is the one that should be paying that. Why? Because they are the one that is getting the benefit. And when you present it that way to the merchant as your sincere desire to see free market capitalism win out, that is something that sounds very, very good to them. So again, I covered this in much more detail in the course, but for right now, why cash discounting? Don't go into the merchant talking about how this is the way you can screw your customers to save money. No, this is a way that you can save money by rightly passing the cost of a benefit on to the person who's receiving it. We want it, Mr. Jones, I want to give your customers the power of choice, and I want them to understand that when they hand you that card, it is costing you 3 and 4%, because by the time you get done paying the interchange fees and paying the processing costs, you're paying 3 or 4% in order to take this card, and the real benefit of accepting this form of payment is actually going to the consumer. So let's work together as small business owners in America, join with the tens of thousands of other small business owners in the U.S. market that are already passing these costs on to the consumer, and let's educate the consumer on the fact that this is costing money and let them decide, is it worth it? Are my reward points worth what the merchant is paying? And if they decide, you know what, no, they're really not worth it, then guess what's going to happen? The interchange rates are going to start to come down, because that's what happens in a free market. In a free market, when the person paying for the benefit is the one receiving the benefit, if what they're receiving isn't worth what they're paying, they say, I don't want to use this anymore, and then the prices come down until it's at a reasonable point. Then the credit card companies are going to have to say, well, wait a second, I guess just like we do in the UK and in Australia and in Canada and everywhere else, I guess we're going to have to bring interchange fees down to a nominal level, and we're going to have to do all these reward and everything through the interest that our customers are paying on these credit cards and through the bank fees, so that the consumer is the one that is paying for the benefits that they are receiving. All right, I got a lot of slides. I can't take that long in every one. I have to move forward a little bit here. Let me answer a couple questions real quick from that one, and then I'll move on. What if the merchant doesn't share that view? I think explaining it like that can get political real quick. Not in my experience. I mean, again, so much of this is just sales, right, Mark? It's like, how to sell stuff. But I mean, I don't know how many merchants you're going to find that believe that it's okay for a monopoly or a collusion of mega companies to get together and to take advantage of small business owners and consumers. I don't think you're going to find very many small business owners that are like, yeah, I think that I like the way it is. I think it's really good that the big banks screw us. I think it's awesome that Visa charges a fifth of what they charge here in the UK, even though they do like 1/10 of our volume. Like, I like that. Like, you know what I mean? So yes, I agree it can get political real fast, and a key part of the pitch is, how are you presenting it? And you've got to present the information that they're going to agree with. Business owners believe in free market economics, again, limited or not, right? I mean, some of them, a business owner that maybe is a Democrat may have a belief on, hey, we need to regulate more, but you know what? They usually don't believe in that much regulation for themselves, for small business. They're more about, we need to regulate these big companies. So maybe that's the way you look at it. And maybe to them, if they say, well, I don't believe in that, then you say, well, okay, so you believe then, you still don't believe it's right. What you believe is that these big companies should be regulated, right? And they're like, yes, okay, so let's do cash discounting until the government steps in and realizes what a mess this is and regulates Visa and MasterCard then, right? So you can present it from either angle, but I think everybody's going to agree that it's not right the way it is now. Correct. Consumers do pay interest on the credit cards already, and that's a really important point that you want to mention is, yes, They are paying the interest, but that's not what covers the reward points and stuff. And there's a reason. I mean, it's very obvious. Look at the interchange table. You'll see exactly what I'm talking about. A rewards card is going to have a higher interchange rate. That's because the merchant is paying most of that cost, because the interest is something that's unknown, right? What if the person pays their card off every month? So the interchange fee is basically a risk-free way for the banks to make all the money they need to cover the programs, and then all they're doing is making profit off the interest. That's why they can go to the UK and charge 0.2% or 0.3% on check card or credit card respectively. They can charge those rates in the UK and still do the cashback rewards. You know why? Because of the interest. So why should the business owner have to pay for something they're not receiving? Majority of merchants, I mentioned this to all, bring up not wanting to lose customers, and nothing I say changes their viewpoint. So Rob, probably my guess is the market that you're in has just not been penetrated at all yet. This is like a network sale, right? So in other words, the first person that bought a phone was an idiot. Like that wasn't valuable at all. Who are they going to call? Nobody else has a phone, right? It's a network thing. Business owners in their market, if they're the only one that charges this, they're terrified, as they should be, because consumers are going to be like, nobody else does this. Why are you doing this, right? So a big part of it is if you present it the way that I just did, make it more of a cause, and then you can get more business owners into it. And I would even go so far as to go to somebody and say, hey, look, you're a pizza shop. Let me present this program, but I'm not trying to sell you right now. Before I would even consider that, I want to get 5 businesses together I want to get 5 pizza shops together that are willing to do this at the same time, and that way nobody loses. That way everybody implements it at the same time. Then that's a great pitch to go to the 15 pizza shops in your market, get a third of them to agree to that, and then make 5 sales at once, and then clean up the other 10 in a hurry because they don't want to be left out. But it is definitely a network thing. Okay, let me move on to the next slide real quick here. So, cash discounting versus surcharging. Well, I'm going to have to go really quick here. Definitely go watch the course, okay? So cash discounting versus surcharging, basically surcharging at this point is just about dead. The reason surcharging is important is you need to understand that surcharging is what kind of brought all of this stuff up in the first place. So let me explain what happened. So 2 really important things happened. Number 1, there was a court case that went all the way to the Supreme Court with Visa, MasterCard, Discover, where merchants sued them and said we should be able to surcharge. Because what you need to understand is that surcharging has never been illegal, right? It was never illegal. Surcharging was just against the Visa, MasterCard rules. And so if a merchant surcharged, then Visa and MasterCard would ostensibly go and shut them down from accepting cards. But it wasn't illegal. It was against the Visa MasterCard rules. So merchants sued them and said, hey, you're like a monopoly now. We should be able to surcharge if we want to. It's our business. It's our prices. So Visa and MasterCard lost that court case, which then enabled merchants to do surcharging. The very next thing that happened is 10 of the largest states, Florida, New York, California, Texas, Ohio? Is it Ohio? I can't remember. Anyway, Colorado, on and on. These states came up and said, ooh, wait a second. So now you're saying that it's okay for them to surcharge. We don't want that in our state. And they made state laws that outlawed surcharging. So the merchants are like, wait a second. You know, what happened? We won. You know, the court said that was an unconstitutional, rule for Visa and MasterCard to have, but somehow it's okay for all the states to make rules against it. So, that happened, but that kind of whet the merchant's appetite for it a little bit. Then the second thing that happened is that the Durbin Amendment came out, and it made a federal law that said it is okay for a merchant to do a discount when someone pays with cash or a different form of payment. So, unfortunately, the language of that law didn't go quite far enough to say surcharging is fine in all 50 states, but it went so far as to say if anybody wants to provide a discount to pay with another form of payment, there is no card brand or bank or state that can keep somebody from doing that. That is a business owner's right. So when you put these 2 things together, cash discounting is basically kind of the child of these 2 ideas, which is, okay, Visa and MasterCard no longer have a rule against surcharging. So that's interesting. But even then, even that law, they're surcharging. You can't surcharge check cards or debit cards or whatever. And so because of that, they're like, okay, that's interesting. And then, okay, we can give a discount when someone pays with something different. So Cash discounting basically says, let's take two different things that we know for sure a merchant is currently allowed to do. The first one is, let's do a price increase. And we're going to do this price increase by making a sign at the counter that very clearly indicates there has been a price increase of 49 cents on everything in the store. Well, that's perfectly legal. A business owner can absolutely do that. The second thing is, let's provide a discount of the exact same amount when someone pays with cash. And we know that's legal because of the Durbin Amendment, right? So we have a price increase of 49 cents on everything, and then we have a discount of 49 cents when someone pays with cash. Two separate things, right? Now, the reason I wanted to put this slide up here and what we're going to get to next is, unfortunately, processors are not doing it that way. And they're about to get themselves into a lot of trouble. So we're going to talk about that. So let me answer some questions, and then I'm going to jump into the next slide here. Surcharging is legal in California now, correct? I read somewhere the law was overturned in 2014 or something. So there are several schools of thought. I would say if you asked that question to 5 lawyers, you would get probably 3 of them would say yes, 2 of them would say no. But it's really a moot point because remember, even though surcharging is legal in California, ostensibly, maybe not, maybe it is, right? Depends on who you ask. But even if it is, you cannot surcharge check cards or debit cards. And so you're only able to surcharge 40% of the transactions, which ends up being a mess. It's so confusing to the merchant. So I would still do cash discounting in all 50 states. Still not getting why a merchant does not simply put an item button on POS, average ticket, 40-cent line item regarding non-cash sale, or raise the price and apply the cash discount button. Yeah, you can't do that. So again, anytime you're raising the price because it's a credit card sale and not clearly delineating that this is an increased price on everything, that becomes a big problem. I'll tell you the other thing too is the idea, Ed, that you're talking about. The reason you came up with that idea there is because you think that would be easier for the merchant, but you're wrong. That would be massively more difficult operationally because now they are actually getting more revenue that they are having to have on their POS reports, and they have to change probably their menu pricing, and there's a bunch of stuff with that. The thing about cash discounting is if it's done right, which it isn't done right a lot of the time, but if it's done right, the money is collected, the service fee is collected from the machine, it's held in escrow by the processor, and then the processor is paying the interchange fees on behalf of the merchant. The way that you're talking about is they're actually collecting this revenue in their system, which they're now going to pay sales tax on, for one thing, right? Because it's like revenue that they're taking in. Also, the compliance is dubious there because they're raising their price, and they have a button that increases the rate on a non-cash sale. You cannot increase the rate on a non-cash sale. You can only discount on a cash sale. And I know that sounds like the dumbest thing ever, and it really is the dumbest thing ever. It's just that's the way the law currently reads. And if Visa and MasterCard find out that a processor is doing that, they're going to come after them and say, hey, wait a second. Number one, you can't surcharge check cards. Right? How does their point of sale system know it's a check card or not? So you get into a lot of sticky issues with that. Let's go to the next one quickly. Oh boy, I gotta go quick. What will Visa, MasterCard, and the government do next? This is the big question. So let's talk about what's already happened. Visa, especially, is not happy about this. Visa has already been reaching out to some of the acquirers. They've had conversations. They've had some conversations with Vantiv, I know for sure, and some others that have had some conversations. And the time frame right now is that Visa is basically saying, within 12 to 18 months, maybe 24 months, they're going to declare war on cash discounting. Pretty much is where we're at. So in 18 months from now, Visa is going to probably do something. File they're going to pick an acquirer and that's doing this, and they're probably going to pick the one that's doing it in the most ridiculous way, the least compliant way, and they're going to sue them and say, you're surcharging, but you're calling it something else, and it's still surcharging. Okay? So that's what's going to happen next. That case is going to go up the chain to the Supreme Court, most likely, or to a regional court. And so it's going to go to the state Supreme Court or to the federal Supreme Court. And what's going to happen is the government is going to make a decision on this. Now, what I think will happen is one of two things. I think that either, number one, that the government is going to rule that this is surcharging, and it would be much simpler if it was just called what it is, which is surcharging, and simultaneously create some new rules around that. So what I would like to see, and if it gets to that point, I will be doing the biggest petition ever. We'll try to get thousands and thousands of business owners on a petition, and I'll work through my network of people, and we're going to get a petition together that basically says, look, if you're going to call it surcharging, then require Visa, MasterCard, Discover, and American Express to, when they send the authorization code back to the terminal, they should also send the interchange rate. So that way, instead of saying, well, you can't surcharge on check card because we cut the rate. Well, if you're a hot dog stand, you pay way more money on a check card than you do a credit card because of that 22-cent per item fee. So instead it should say the terminal is going to receive back the interchange rate, and then we're going to make a system that allows you to pass that through to the consumer. So I think either that's going to happen, or worst case scenario, the government's going to basically just jump in and say, this is ridiculous, this just keeps going on and on and on, let's just regulate the whole industry and be done with it. And that's kind of the problem, is if they start regulating interchange, well then are they going to regulate processors, and so that's where you run into more problems. So the takeaway from this, though, is what's going to happen next is at some point Visa is most likely going to either sue a group of merchants if they find some large enough merchants for it to make sense, or more likely they're going to sue an acquirer, like for instance TSYS that's doing the TSYS is doing the cash discounting, so Visa might decide to sue them and say, hey, you can't do this. This is surcharging, and you're surcharging check cards. So the big sticking point is going to be, it's not that people are doing this. Visa doesn't care, because you have to understand, according to the Visa rules, you can surcharge in every state. So according to Visa, the Visa would never sue somebody over surcharging in New York or surcharging in Florida, because they don't have anything against surcharging in any state. That's their rules now allow that. The states are the ones that would sue and say you can't do this because they have the laws against surcharging, and the states so far have been mildly okay with cash discounting. I mean, there hasn't been any big kerfuffles that I'm aware of. So, probably what's going to happen next is that Visa is going to sue one of these things not for surcharging, but for surcharging check cards. And so that's where, it's going to run into some problem, because that is against the Visa MasterCard rules according to the settlement that they have. So that's probably what's going to happen next. Now, again, the takeaway, though, is 18 months from now, Visa files a suit against somebody, right? Big whoop. Like, it's going to take another 3 to 5 years usually, and I could be wrong. I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice. I'm not a CPA, but when you look at how things transpire, this kind of stuff usually takes a long time. If Visa starts taking action in 18 months, probably 5 to 7 years from now, something will change. So it's not like this is like I've got 6 months. I mean, that's highly unlikely. Most likely, unless some state law comes out in your state or something, most likely if this does end up getting handled at the federal level, this is going to take a while. And so, that's important to understand. Let's see what kind of other questions we got here. Okay. Did they already send letters to more acquiring banks to stop this? I am not privy to any particular acquiring bank that they've sent these letters to. I do know that Visa, again, I wasn't even aware until a few days ago. I talked to people about the letters. At this point, really what it is, and again, this is where I think a lot of people have a misperception about big organizations. Big organizations are like small organizations in that there are people that are making decisions. So what's happening right now is that the CEO of TSYS is talking to the CEO of Visa, and you know what I mean? It's at that level right now where it's more of just, hey, at our annual retreat, of the payments, whatever, we're talking about this. And so that's where it's at right now. Have there been letters sent out? I know I've heard some rumors about some letters that have been sent. I've not seen them, so I don't know for sure that they exist. But yeah, I'm sure Visa is going to be sending out some letters to acquirers because they want to start having some legal, like, hey, we notified them and they didn't heed our notification. But again, what I've heard is it's been more in the terms of, and this is heard from a pretty reliable source, is that Visa is not looking to take any major action for about 18 months. Let's see here. No, Mark. Maybe you're better connected than I am, but I do know most of the top people in the industry, and I haven't heard any. There's absolutely no rumblings whatsoever of Visa doing anything right now at all, other than, again, having conversations, sending some warning, whatever. But you have to understand, Mark, the thing you have to understand about this is it's not like Visa can snap their fingers and make something happen. They're like, they don't have a police force, they don't have an army. They have to go through the courts or they have to go through the legislative process, and either one of those two things takes a very, very, very long time. Anything happening within 18 months of substance would be miraculous, because you're talking about either getting a law passed at the federal level for something that is not a high priority to anybody right now. You're talking about right now less than 1% of all businesses in the U.S. that are doing cash discounting. I promise you that the U.S. Congress or House of Representatives or Senate, they are not going to take this up right now. There's absolutely no way. So what you're talking about is you're talking about a legal battle. Well, legal battles, goodness gracious. The last one, when they finally won that settlement with the surcharges, it took 9 years. Like, they were sued 9 years before, and then it came, so there's just no way. I mean, it would be miraculous if something happened before that. When will the IQ tool be able to do cash discounting? I'm going to say pretty solidly right now 2 weeks. So we're very close to doing the new release. It does surcharging right now. The Instant Quote tool will be able to do that in 6 months. Visa can still make their own rules. It's up to the merchants to bring a case to sue them, right? No, that is absolutely wrong, Mark. So Visa already has gone to the Supreme Court, and their rules are now much more regulated than they were before because of that settlement. That's one of the reasons that cash discounting is working, because the courts basically already said to Visa, hey, you're about to get in trouble. See, Mark, I think part of this that you might be misunderstanding in terms of leverage, you have to understand Visa, like all of the other countries, have already regulated interchange down. Right? And I'm talking about down, like cutting their profits by 90%. If that happens in the U.S., that is a game over problem for Visa. They do not want that to happen. And so they have to tread very carefully, because if they make it look like they're bringing a petty case, if they came right now and sued and went to the Supreme Court, hey, look, 1% of the merchants in the U.S., they're passing fees on to consumers in a way that we don't agree with, but they say it's legal. Do you know what's going to happen? That's going to be a front page story. Visa attacks small business owners. Now the federal government is absolutely going to get involved, right? Because the Congress is not going to stand for that. What are they going to do? They're going to jump in and say, screw you, Visa. You're a monopoly. We're going to regulate you just like the UK and just like Australia and just like Canada and just like Finland and just like Germany and just like France and just like Spain. And so Visa has to be careful. It sounds to me from your comments that you feel like Visa is this all-powerful beast. Visa is running scared for their life right now. They do not want to get regulated. That is their only end game. So if this stays in 1 to 5% of merchants, now the reason they're saying 18 months is they believe that 18 months from now, with the rate that this is going, there are actually going to be 3 or 4% of the small business owners in the U.S. that are doing cash discounting. Well, now it's affecting enough consumers that now Visa can frame it as, oh, look at the poor consumer, they're getting ripped off, Now, but it's political. It's about perception right now. It's not about reality, and so that's the part I think you might be missing there a little bit. Why is Visa and MasterCard against cash discounting, considering they are still getting their money? Well, the reason they're against it is because the whole underlying idea of a cash discount is to incentivize people to not use their form of payment. Now, of course, it hasn't had that effect yet, which is another reason I don't think they're going to move very quickly. But you are correct that that's one of the reasons they're not moving on it that quickly. But it is something where technically we're incentivizing them to not use Visa and MasterCard, which is not great. So, okay. Oh boy. All right. I don't know how many more of these I'm going to get. I was supposed to be done 5 minutes ago. How are processors passing on the fees? Generally speaking, they're doing so in the worst possible way ever. It is ridiculous. So this is where it gets really frustrating. I really just honestly don't have the time to cover it. I watched the video. I did 2 or 3 videos just on this. The short version is they're using a daily discount, and most of them are. Others are doing the most ridiculous thing, like, oh, it just drives me crazy. So you can actually program a lot of these machines to do a surcharge, okay? And so there's actually processors where the merchant has been getting notified from Visa because they're literally processing it through the terminal and submitting it as a surcharge, but they're doing it on check cards. And it's like, oh my word, like, hello. And so, like, I'll give you a really good example. If you're selling cash discounting right now and you are putting up one sign in your merchant location, you are almost guaranteed to be non-compliant. Cash discounting is and must be two different things. It is a price increase and it is a cash discount. Those two things cannot be linked. They are not the same thing. They are not two parts of the same process. If they are, then that merchant is absolutely non-compliant. Okay? There are two separate signs that must go up in the merchant location. They can be together, but they have to be clearly separated and obviously posted for the consumer to see. One sign says, we increased our price on everything. The other sign says, you can get a cash discount if you pay with cash. It has to be done that way. Otherwise, they're not compliant. So be very careful with this. Because again, what's going to be a big problem is that when Visa and MasterCard do come down and sue in 18 months, they're going to pick one of these acquirers that is actually doing it in the wrong way. And the court's going to have to say, oh yeah, that cash discounting is a total scam. You can't do that anymore. Well, that's going to be a problem. So there is a right way to do it. The other thing I'll tell you is, on the next slide here, can the merchant waive the fee? Well, yes, but then it has to be a third thing. There has to be a customer loyalty discount or something else. Because if you have a cash discount, then every time somebody processes a credit card or a check card or anything non-cash or check or whatever, you have to have the service fee on there. Now, separate from that, you can have a discount that's not a cash discount. It's a customer loyalty discount. If I go, so let me give you an example of this, all right? If I go to buy a car and I drive up on the lot in my old jalopy Ford, 10-year-old Ford, and I get out and I walk over to a Ford Mustang that's brand new. The salesman walks out, he sees my car, and I say, hey, how much is this Ford Mustang? And he looks at me and says, this guy probably doesn't have much money, and he says, this car is $18,000. That's the list price. I'm like, okay. I drive off the lot. Another person pulls up in a Mercedes, brand new Mercedes. The guy gets out, walks over to the same exact Ford Mustang and says, how much is this car? Well, the salesman looks at my Mercedes and says, the list price is $21,000. Now, that is illegal. In other words, it is illegal to set your price based on what you think the person is able to pay the list price, right? You can't do that. That's illegal. But if I went on there and he told me it was $18,000 and the other guy came and told him it was $18,000, but when I went there, I didn't ask for a discount. I just paid the $18,000. The next guy comes up and says, how much is this one? And there was two identical cars side by side. I bought the one for $18,000. I didn't ask for a discount. I paid the list price. The second person comes and says, hey, that's cool. You've got that Mustang there. How much is it? And the guy says $18,000. That's legal. And then this guy says, well, can I get a discount? I'd be willing to offer you $17,000. Well, the sales rep might say, sure, I'll take your $17,000. So now we have two people that bought something at a different price. That is perfectly fine and acceptable and legal because one person asked for a discount and was granted a discount. So in the same way, if two customers are, back to back or whatever in a line, and they both have the identical product, one of them comes up and pays with a card, and they pay $10 plus the 50-cent fee, so they pay $10.50. The second person comes up and goes to pay for it, and the price is still $10.50, but they say, I've been a loyal customer for a long time. I don't want to pay that 50 cents. And the business owner says, fine, we actually have a customer loyalty discount of 50 cents for our loyal customers. I'm going to give you that discount, and that will then remove that. But then notice on the receipt, there's still a 50-cent service fee. They just took the price of the item from $10 to $9.50. So again, there are literally no processors right now that are doing that exactly the right way, which is frustrating. I think I'm talking to a lot of them, and I think we'll get there, but that is how they can waive the fee, and that's really important. All right, let me answer some questions. My last slide is just going to talk to you. I will go ahead and go through it here. This is my last slide, and then we'll be done. So let me answer some questions, and then I'll talk to you about what I think you should do right now as it relates to cash discounting. Where's the access to the course? Sure. Just go to HTTPS. I'm going to put it in the bar up here. So it's instantquotecourse.com. quotetool.com. I mean, I really can't stress enough to you how little I covered in this 30 minutes. That just wasn't nearly enough time. You really need to go through the course. So go to instantquotetool.com, click on Start My Free Trial if you don't already have a trial, or just sign in. And then you go to Training, and then you click on when you click on the training in the upper right, once you sign in, scroll to the bottom and you'll see the cash discounting. And again, I've got a lot. I mean, I have a ton of courses. If you haven't even signed up for the tool yet, you're crazy. Like, I mean, Goodnight for literally free, because it's a free trial. You can go in there right now and get tons of really good content that I don't have anywhere else publicly. So definitely take advantage of that. So what should ISOs and reps do? Well, a couple things. Number one, I think you should really take advantage of this opportunity to sell the cash discounting. And again, not because you should take advantage of merchants or you should take advantage of consumers. I don't think you need to cloak it in something like that. I think it is legitimately and sincerely a good opportunity for small business owners to band together and say, hey, Visa, hey, MasterCard, we don't like what you're doing, it's not fair, and we've had enough, and we're saying no, because you're charging us money that doesn't make sense. You know, some of these merchants, they have literally, some of these merchants that I talk to, the lease payment on their building is $1,000 a month, and they're paying $1,400 a month in credit card processing fees. And I think it's time for these business owners to stand up and say, no, that's enough. Too much money, Visa. And again, you know, it's like the whole industry loves to blame the ISOs. You know, like, well, if you guys weren't marking everybody up, you know, 0.5%, give me a break. Visa and MasterCard are marking them up 2%. You know what I mean? Like, we're the ones doing the customer service. We're the ones doing the tech support. We're the ones providing the terminal. We're the ones that are there when they call. We're the ones that are sending them their money. We're the ones that are sending them their money before we get it. Like, why are we the bad guys? We're marking it up 0.5%. 0.8%. I mean, if you found a statement right now that was marked up 100 basis points, you'd be like, wow, that person's really getting ripped off. Well, what about Visa and MasterCard and the big banks and what they're collecting? They're marking them up 2% in a lot of cases, 2.5%. What about them? What are they doing? What is interchange fees for? What does it do? I mean, like, literally, think about it. What do the banks do? They move money. Like, literally, they electronically move money from one account to the other, which is all automated. Visa and MasterCard, what do? Well, they cover fraud. No, they don't. They pass it on to the acquirer, which passes it on to the merchant. They don't do anything. They have a network. They have a big technology thing, and it enables all this stuff to happen, and I'm glad that they built it, and it's a really cool system, and there's no way on earth that they need to keep between the brands and the banks. There's no way that they need 2% of the revenue to cover their costs and make a profit of 90% margin. It's ridiculous.